So no intro or anything, I just want to get into this video, because we just got what is probably one of the coolest or otherwise most interesting Fallout 4 weapon mods that we've seen so far for this mod. As just this past week, a modder has added fully functional and working bows and arrows into Fallout 4. Now at first glance that might not seem that crazy or exceptional, but considering Fallout 4 is now almost 4 years old, and there have been numerous attempts at bows and arrows but very little success in that area, does make this pretty substantial, and well, based on the implementation of this mod, it's a really good one. So backtracking a little to look at this mod, it's actually going to be called LString Fallout Bow, and it's going to do kind of what I just said, add bows and arrows into Fallout 4. At its core, it's going to have 3 separate bows to pick from, a relatively simple bow, a slightly more sophisticated one, and then a notably more sophisticated compound bow. And as the sophistication does increase, the bow on average will deal more damage. But even further, you could actually set the draw weight, so how much weight you are actually pulling back as you pull back the bow, and obviously the higher the weight, the more it will sling forward, and that will affect the damage output from each of the bows. Although regardless, the compound bow will have the highest damage output. And of course, with any bow and arrow mod, the other half of this that really has to make it is the arrows, and it definitely delivers with that also. There's several different arrow types for you to pick from. Every time you actually select this bow in your inventory, you'll have the option to choose from whatever arrows you do have on you, and there are a lot of really cool and custom ones here that you're probably going to want to mess with. One of the aspects about this mod that makes it so interesting, at least to me, is that I really hadn't seen too much about it. This is a massive undertaking and obviously achievement now that you could actually see some of the gameplay of it, and I feel like typically when you actually get mods like this that really bring a certain category a step forward or introduce something totally new and unique, you'll kind of first get the experimental version that kind of works, you see what it's going for, but it doesn't do it completely. But that's not the case with this bow and arrow. It is a very complete and awesome weapon mod that pretty much has all of the features I would hope to see from it. There's very little that's missing here. Again, you do have those 3 bow types to choose from. There is level disintegration, so you'll occasionally find these on enemies. The bows do have their own modification options, so you can add different sights, scopes, as well as you can modify the material and textures if you wanted to do so. And as far as the arrows go, you also do have a pretty good range. Just some super basic wood and stone arrows to field arrows to broadhead arrows, but of course with their own Fallout flavor, like nuclear arrows, storm tracking arrows that just explode and cause a lot of damage on impact, and several other things all in between. This is a really fun to use mod. And frankly, if you're looking for something truly different in the space of weapon mods for Fallout 4, it's going to be this, and it's definitely one I would recommend trying. It's a lot of fun to use or even just find in the world, and naturally in the survival setting it fits in pretty well. But then going on the polar opposite of a bow and arrow, we also do have Mech Out 23rd Century Combat. So this is actually implementing characters from an existing series into Fallout 4. I don't know much about that, I couldn't tell you much about what these are actually based off of, but what I can tell you is this is a pretty freaking cool mod. So at its core, what it's going to be are new things you can create at the robot crafting workbench, naturally requiring the robot DLC for Fallout 4, but these things are pretty cool. They're effectively going to be various kinds of mechs with various customization options. And in those customization options are a lot of different weapons you could attach to these guys. You can see how in combat you could have a lot of firepower, a lot of variety in that firepower, lasers, rockets, and heavy machine guns all firing at your enemies. But even further, it's not just adding in one type of mech, but rather 4. There are several different variants you can use that do have different customization options when it does come to weapons, and of course just visually they look quite distinctive going from one to the other. And even within each of the individual variants, there are some modifications like which helmet or head is going on, but really the fun of this one is with stacking them up with several different weapons and just seeing them unleash all of that firepower against a couple of enemies. It's very satisfying and obviously a very different take on what kind of companions or even settlers you want to have in this game, but it actually gets a little bit cooler as there's an option to set the scale of these robots, meaning you can create giant mechs with this mod that do tower over pretty much everything else you'll find in the Commonwealth. You can do it for all of the various mechs added in with this mod, and it makes it a lot more satisfying. Like you have a genuine giant robot on your side fighting with you. As far as some of the other minor details, you could also change the materials of this one, but more so than anything else, I would recommend downloading this mod and even just messing around with it for a little while because it's just so much freaking fun. Even though it's not a massive improvement on the companion AI, you could trick out some of these robots with so much firepower that it honestly doesn't matter. All they're going to do is walk at enemies enemies and shoot them, but they have enough guns that that shooting actually gets the point across pretty well. Another really fun one that I definitely recommend messing around with against some high-level enemies. But hey, maybe you wanted a more futuristic armor to go along with your futuristic mechs, then we also do have the Enclave Remnant's armor. This is actually a very simple mod. It's going to add in the Fallout 3 style Enclave armor into Fallout 4 in a very high detailed fashion. This mod definitely isn't perfect though, and I think to a lot of you that it'll be immediately obvious. It seems like it's the mod author's first go at an armor mod like this, and there's definitely some real good quality content here. If you're looking for something or an armor in the Fallout 3 or Fallout New Vegas style, this is probably going to be one of the best options you have, at least as of late. A lot of armor mods like this will definitely be power armor and not just traditional armor. Although at the same time, the way it sits on the character's body is a little bit weird. Fortunately, the armor itself looks really good. It is high detail. Even on the back, there's a little vent that does spin as you are running around, and that's just a really cool little feature, especially if you're playing in some darker environments. It's fairly basic though, with just a couple of customization options, and I think if in a future update, it is made so it actually sits on the player character a little bit better, that would be a massive improvement to it. But even as it stands right now, it's definitely a cool and high quality new armor that Enclave fans are probably going to enjoy using, or you could just use it with your blacked out mech if you want to go that route. So all of the previous mods kind of made sense. This one doesn't, but it's awesome. As next up, we do have FallShark, the next mod from M150, who is always known for good but rather odd mods. What this mod's going to do is add in a new enemy NPC into Fallout 4 that with land sharks. These are sharks that will swim around the land, kind of similar to mole rats, but at the same time not. They will burrow under, creating a lot of dust and making them impossibly hard to see, and they come in a variety of different sizes and shapes. And you can definitely get some of the bigger and tougher ones that will be pretty daunting. There's actually also a land Jaws added in with this. That's kind of the super final boss enemy that has some pretty cool moves, as you can see from the gameplay trailer for this one. And that's really the mod. Sometimes now, as you're exploring around, you will find not just a wrath scorpion or one of the other typical Fallout creatures, but a land shark tracking you and stalking you and eventually jumping out at you. These are genuinely difficult, and I imagine if you're a lower level or don't have a ton of health, this will prove to be a pretty big problem for your character. It can be really hard to follow and see where these guys go, and oftentimes I was surprised by them just kind of popping out somewhere. But that's actually not it. These also do drop custom shark fins that you can create into foods. There are a couple of different foods you could use this with, and all of them are pretty cool. Just a nice little extra bit to go along with this mod, making it a bit cooler. But it also adds in 2 new chems into Fallout 4 that are very interesting. Following the FallShark name, the FallShark chem is going to make it so sharks fall from the sky for 3 minutes. And yeah, that's it. You just kind of have to weather the storm. There's no real point to this otherwise, but it's just one of those things that's kind of funny and fun to use. You probably could strategically use this not in your own base, but rather in an enemy base, as the sharks will attack some surrounding enemies. And it's so random and odd that it's just kind of hilarious. There also is another chem, FallShark's Pax Sharkana, and what that's going to do is make it so the bigger and tougher fall jaws actually do come from the sky for 5 minutes instead of 3 minutes. And these definitely prove to be a much tougher fight, and you will see them flying around just everywhere. So all in all, definitely another odd or otherwise kind of bizarre mod from M150, but at the same time, kind of a cool one, and one that is oddly fun and satisfying to use in Fallout 4. Definitely proving to be fairly challenging over the long term, as these guys will just pop up out of nowhere. And last but not least, just to balance out this video, I did want to include a quality of life mod, and for that we do have the scrap button for junk. All this mod's going to do is allow you to now more easily scrap junk in Fallout 4. If you find a piece of junk on the ground, you'll have the option to, rather than just take it, actually scrap it, which will input its raw materials into your inventory. So you don't have to go through that extra step later on, or don't have to encumber with that large carry weight. And you can also do this on containers to scrap all of the junk in it. Although this is balanced fairly well, as to actually do this, you have to have the Scrapper 1 perk in order to just use the scrap on floating junk, and the Scrapper 2 perk to actually scrap junk inside of containers. It's relatively simple, but I think a nice quality of life mod that's implemented in a good way. For those of you still playing Fallout 4 and actually going through existing playthroughs, this is going to be a great addition to just make things a little bit more enjoyable. But yeah, otherwise, those are all the mods I had to share with you for Fallout 4 that came out over the past couple of weeks. A lot of really good ones in this video, and a lot of really odd or otherwise interesting ones. Although before we end things off, I actually want to share today's psychology fun fact for this video, and it's more of kind of a personal anecdote or experience of the effect of priming, specifically visual priming. So priming, or really a priming task, if you're not familiar, is basically showing you a certain set of objects, so they're kind of encoded or held in working memory to some degree, so you're used to seeing them, and then hypothetically, later on, you'll be more biased towards those objects, items, or words, numbers, whatever they may be. And while actually completing undergrad, my human memory class specifically, this was put on full display by my professor, where basically what we did was prime to a certain set of numbers that basically just involved trying to read the numbers, then recall them or hold them in our memory, and then later on, we did an experiment where we actually had numbers flash on screen ahead of us really quickly. It would just be random numbers, let's say 27, 17, 9. I don't know the exact timings on these, but they would flash on screen for milliseconds, not long enough to actually kind of fully comprehend or visualize what was shown, but the numbers that we were primed with first on average were actually recognized. So let's say on the first stage of this, I actually saw the number 27, then on the second stage, the number 27 flashed on screen very fast, and momentarily, I was able to actually recognize, oh, that was the number 27. Where in follow-up numbers, if I wasn't actually primed with them, I wasn't able to recognize them in the time by which they were displayed. So it was like it went too quickly, and I was like, oh yeah, I don't know what that number was. Doing this was one of the singular, most surreal experiences I had in my psychology education, because due to the priming effect, I couldn't really visually see the numbers. It went too quick for me to actually store it visually, but it was almost like I was understanding it on a lexical level, or just actually by seeing the number and recognizing something else I had in memory. So it created this almost supernatural like feeling where if I logically thought about it, I was like, oh, I don't really know if I saw that number. But in my head, this number just stuck out because it was matching it with the previously primed information. So I'd be thinking about 29, but I couldn't fully understand why I had that number, why that was the right answer. If you can find online one of these priming studies that is in a quick pace like this, I definitely recommend trying it out. It's a really cool and surreal experience, and one of the cooler things I've experienced in psychology. Either way though, that's pretty much going to wrap it up for this one. As always again, I thank you for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. But with that, I hope to see you all next time. Later.